Silence filled the void between stars as two ships drifted in the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming under distant starlight. The human exploration vessel Resilience looked small and fragile next to the massive Drakmari warship that had intercepted it at the edge of known space. Admiral Vorth examined the primitive craft through his tactical displays, his scaled fingers tapping against the command console with growing amusement. These humans had barely mastered faster-than-light travel, their crude fusion engines sputtering like dying embers compared to the refined power cores that drove Drakmari vessels across the galaxy. Their weapons were laughably basic, little more than enhanced projectile systems and low-yield energy beams that could barely scratch military-grade armor. The Drakmari Empire had conquered 47 worlds across 3 galactic sectors, each species falling before their technological superiority and tactical brilliance. Some had tried to resist, mounting desperate last stands with whatever weapons they possessed. But none had lasted more than a few months against the Imperial fleet. The pattern was always the same: shock, desperate negotiation, futile resistance, and finally complete surrender. Vorth's communication officer, a young Drakmari named Kelth, looked up from his station with barely contained excitement. "Admiral, the human vessel is requesting to speak with our commanding officer. They claim to represent something called the United Earth Council, A." Low rumble of laughter escaped Vorth's throat as he settled back in his command chair. The bridge crew shared glances of amusement, some barely suppressing their own chuckles at the audacity of these newcomers. What could a species that had only recently stumbled into space possibly have to say to the representatives of a galactic empire? "Put them through," Vorth commanded, adjusting his ceremonial armor and ensuring his medals were properly displayed. First impressions mattered when establishing dominance over a new species, and the sight of Drakmari military decorations had broken the spirit of many would-be resistors. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the human vessel. Vorth studied the primitive control panels and basic displays with growing contempt before his attention focused on the human standing at the center of the cramped space. The creature was smaller than most Drakmari, with pale skin and short brown hair, wearing what appeared to be a simple military uniform with minimal decoration. "I am Captain Reed Anderson of the United Earth Exploration Service," the human said, his voice steady despite the obvious disparity in their respective positions. "I understand you wish to speak with us." Vorth leaned forward, allowing his considerable bulk to dominate the screen. At nearly 8 feet tall, with naturally armored scales and piercing yellow eyes, Drakmari had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. Their very appearance had been enough to cow lesser species into submission. "I am Admiral Vorth of the Drakmari Imperial Navy," he declared, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories. "Your species has entered space claimed by the Drakmari Empire. By imperial decree, all intelligent species within our territory must submit to Drakmari rule, or face the consequences of their defiance." Anderson nodded, slowly as if considering this information carefully. "I see. And what exactly does submission to Drakmari rule entail?" The question pleased Vorth, suggesting that these humans might be more reasonable than some species they had encountered. Perhaps this would be another easy conquest, with minimal losses to his fleet. "Your species will provide tribute in the Yao form of resources and labor," Vorth explained with practiced ease. "Your military forces will be disbanded, your weapons surrendered. Drakmari governors will oversee your worlds, ensuring compliance with imperial law. In return, you will receive the protection of the Empire and the benefits of our advanced technology." "And if we refuse?" Anderson asked, his expression remaining neutral. Vorth's smile revealed rows of sharp teeth, a predatory grin that had haunted the nightmares of countless conquered peoples. "Then your species will be eliminated. Every world, every colony, every human settlement will be reduced to ash and molten rock. The Drakmari Empire does not tolerate defiance." To emphasize his point, Vorth gestured to his tactical officer. "Display our fleet strength." The communication channel switched to an external view, showing the massive formation of Drakmari warships surrounding the small human vessel. 500 dreadnoughts hung in space like sleeping giants, each one capable of destroying a planet's surface in a matter of hours. Their dark hulls bristled with weapon systems, shield projectors, and sensor arrays that spoke of technological advancement far beyond anything these humans could comprehend. Each of these vessels carries enough firepower to sterilize a world. Vorth continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. Our smallest destroyer is 3 times the size of your largest warship. Our shields can absorb any weapon your species has developed, while our guns can punch through any armor you might construct. Anderson studied the display with apparent interest, occasionally nodding as if taking mental notes. His calm reaction surprised Vorth slightly. Most species showed obvious signs of fear or desperation when faced with such overwhelming force. Impressive, Anderson admitted. I can see why so. Many species have chosen to submit to your empire. However, I'm not authorized to make such a decision on behalf of all humanity. I would need to return to Earth and consult with our government leaders. Vorth waved a dismissive hand. Of course. Lesser species always require time to accept the inevitable. You have 7 standard days to return with your species' surrender. Any delay beyond that period will be considered an act of rebellion. 7 days, Anderson repeated, thoughtfully. That should be sufficient time. However, I do have one request. If you would be willing to accommodate it. The Admiral's eyes narrowed slightly. Few conquered species dared to make requests during surrender negotiations, but he was curious to hear what these humans might want. Speak your request, Vorth commanded. Government will want proof of Drakmari military capabilities before making their final decision, Anderson explained. Would you be willing to provide a demonstration of your weapons technology? Nothing too elaborate. Perhaps destroying that large asteroid in the nearby field would suffice. Vorth's amusement returned in full force. The request was so typical of primitive species, always needing to see destruction firsthand before accepting their fate. He had granted similar demonstrations dozens of times, and the results were always the same. Complete psychological surrender within hours of witnessing Drakmari power. Your request is granted, Vorth declared magnanimously. Observe and learn what resistance to the Drakmari Empire brings. The Admiral turned to his weapons officer, a veteran named Drex, who had participated in 17 planetary sieges. Target the largest asteroid. In grid 77 Alpha, full power, single burst. Target acquired, Admiral, Drex reported, his scaled hands dancing across his control console. Particle cannon charged and ready. Fire space erupted in brilliant light as concentrated energy lanced out from the Drakmari destroyer's main gun. The asteroid, roughly the size of a small moon, simply ceased to exist. One moment it hung. In space among its smaller companions, the next there was only expanding plasma and scattered debris. Anderson watched the display with apparent fascination, occasionally asking technical questions about energy output and targeting systems. His scientific curiosity seemed genuine, though Vorth noted that the human was taking detailed mental notes of everything he observed. Remarkable technology, Anderson said finally. I believe this demonstration will certainly influence our government's decision. With your permission, Admiral, I would like to return to Earth immediately to begin consultations. Vorth nodded graciously. Permission? Granted. Remember, human, 7 days. Any attempt to flee beyond our sensor range will result in immediate pursuit and destruction. Understood completely, Anderson replied. Thank you for your patience and courtesy, Admiral Vorth. I hope our next meeting will be under more pleasant circumstances. The communication channel closed, leaving Vorth staring at the empty view screen with satisfaction. Another species about to join the growing Drakmari Empire. Another victory to add to his already impressive record. These humans seemed more intelligent than most. Perhaps they would prove useful as administrators or technicians once properly trained. As the small human vessel began its journey back toward their home system, Vorth settled back in his command chair with complete confidence. In 7 days he would accept humanity's surrender and begin the process of integrating another conquered species into the Empire. He had no way of knowing that Captain Anderson was already composing a very different kind of message for Earth's leaders. one that would set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of Drakmari arrogance. Emergency lights bathed the United Earth Council chambers in urgent red as representatives from 42 worlds gathered for the most important session in human history. News of the Drakmari ultimatum had reached Earth just 6 hours ago, and panic was already spreading across human space like wildfire. Dr. Elena Morrison stood before the massive holographic display showing the alien fleet's position, her fingers dancing across her tablet as she compiled intelligence reports from every human outpost and listening station within 50 light-years of the contact zone. As Earth's chief military strategist and former colonial defense coordinator, she had spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. The aliens call themselves the Drakmari Empire, Morrison began, her voice cutting through the worried murmur of assembled delegates. Our analysis of Captain Anderson's sensor data confirms they possess technology significantly more advanced than ours. Their weapons are at least 2 generations ahead. Their shields are nearly impenetrable by conventional means, and their fleet size exceeds our entire military by a factor of 10. Council President Sarah Kim leaned forward in her chair, her face pale but determined. Dr. Morrison, what are our realistic chances if we choose to resist? Morrison paused, considering her words carefully. The truth was harsh, but these leaders needed to understand exactly what humanity faced against a conventional military response using standard tactics and deployment patterns. Morrison said, slowly, 0. We would lose every engagement probably within hours of first contact. Gasps and worried whispers filled the chamber, but Morrison raised her hand for silence. However, she continued, I said conventional response. Humanity has one significant advantage that these Drakmari have never encountered before. Admiral Davis Chen, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet, stood up from his seat near the front. A veteran of the Titan colony uprising and 3 separate pirate campaigns, Chen had more combat experience than any serving human officer. What advantage could we possibly have against a species that has conquered 47 worlds? Chen asked, though his tone suggested he might already know the answer. Morrison smiled grimly. Experience with total warfare. According to Captain Anderson's report, every species the Drakmari conquered submitted within months. Most were peaceful traders, isolationist cultures, or primitive civilizations that barely understood the concept of organized military resistance. She gestured to the display, which now showed human military installations scattered across dozens of worlds. But we're different, Morrison continued. Humanity has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. We've fought each other across every continent on Earth, developed weapons and tactics through centuries of conflict, and learned to turn every aspect of our civilization into a military asset when threatened with extinction. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the implications of Morrison's words. Are you suggesting we fight them? Asked Representative Lisa Park from the Centauri colonies. 8 billion people against a galactic empire. Morrison nodded without hesitation. Not just fight them, defeat them, but only if we act immediately and commit everything we have to this effort. She touched her tablet, and the display changed to show detailed schematics of hidden military installations throughout human space. For the past 20 years, since we first detected signs of advanced alien civilizations, every human world has maintained extensive hidden defenses. Mining stations that are actually weapon platforms, cargo containers filled with military drones, asteroid belts riddled with concealed gun batteries. Engineer Luke Patterson, head of colonial engineering, stood to address the council. His weathered face showed the strain of working 18-hour days since receiving word of the alien threat. Dr. Morrison is correct, Patterson confirmed. Every major industrial facility in human space has dual-purpose capability. Our shipyards can switch to military production within hours. Our refineries can produce military-grade explosives instead of civilian chemicals. And our transport networks can move troops and equipment across entire star systems in days rather than months. Admiral Chen activated his own display, showing fleet positions throughout human territory. We've also maintained strategic reserves that few people know about, Chen added. Hidden shipyards behind gas giant moons, Entire fleets mothballed in asteroid fields, weapon stockpiles scattered across uninhabited systems. If we activate everything simultaneously, we can field nearly 3,000 combat vessels. Morrison watched the faces of the delegates as they began to understand the scope of humanity's secret preparations. The key, Morrison explained, is that we don't fight them ship to ship where their technology gives them every advantage. Instead, we use what humans have always done best. We adapt, we improvise, and we turn their own strengths against them. She touched her tablet again, and the display showed tactical simulations of various engagement scenarios. These Drakmari are accustomed to easy victories. They expect to show overwhelming force, have their enemies surrender, then occupy territories without significant resistance. But what if we don't surrender? What if every system they enter becomes a trap? What if every victory costs them more than they expected? Pilot Nina Reeves, representing the Independent Cargo Haulers Union, raised her hand to speak. Her organization controlled thousands of civilian vessels that moved goods between human worlds. Dr. Morrison, you're talking about turning our entire civilian infrastructure into military assets, Reeves observed. That means every cargo hauler, every mining ship, every transport vessel becomes a potential weapon. Are you asking us to sacrifice our entire way of life for this fight? Morrison met her gaze directly. I'm asking you to preserve it because if we surrender to these aliens, humanity as we know it ceases to exist. Our children become slaves, our worlds become tribute generators, and our species becomes just another conquered territory in their empire. The chamber erupted in debate as delegates discussed the implications among themselves. Some argued for surrender, believing that resistance would only bring greater suffering. Others demanded immediate mobilization of every available resource. President Kim called for order, her voice cutting through the chaos. Dr. Morrison, assuming we choose to resist, what exactly are you proposing? Morrison straightened, knowing that the next few minutes would determine humanity's fate. Phase 1. Immediate mobilization of all hidden military assets, she began, counting off on her fingers. Every concealed weapon platform comes online. Every reserve fleet activates. Every dual-purpose facility switches to military production. Phase 2. Strategic withdrawal and fortification. We make them fight for every system, every world, every asteroid. Nothing comes easy. Every victory costs them ships and resources they weren't expecting to lose. Phase 3. The decisive engagement. When they commit their main fleet to what they think will be the final battle, we spring our trap. Everything we've prepared, every advantage we can possibly create gets used in one coordinated strike. Admiral Chen leaned back in his chair, considering the plan. It's ambitious, he admitted, and incredibly dangerous. If we fail, the retaliation will be swift and total. If we surrender, Morrison countered, the result is the same. The end of human independence. At least, this way we go down fighting. Engineer Patterson activated his own display, showing production capabilities across human space. I can have military conversion protocols active within 12 hours, Patterson announced. Weapon production can increase by 400% if we repurpose civilian manufacturing, shield generators, missile systems, armor plating. We can produce everything we need if the raw materials are available. The materials are available, confirmed mining coordinator Beth Williams via holographic link from the outer colonies. Our asteroid mining operations can shift to military metals immediately. We've been stockpiling strategic materials for years in preparation for expansion. Now we can use those reserves for weapons and ship construction. President Kim looked around the chamber, seeing the determination growing on faces that had been filled with despair just minutes earlier. Dr. Morrison, Kim said formally, are you confident this plan can succeed? Morrison paused, knowing that honesty was crucial. I'm confident we can hurt them badly enough to make them reconsider their easy conquest. Whether that leads to victory or simply a more honorable defeat, that depends on how well we execute the plan and how quickly they adapt to our tactics. She gestured to the tactical displays surrounding them. But I am certain of one thing. If we fight smart instead of fighting fair, If we use every advantage our history has taught us, these Drakmari will discover that conquering humanity is very different from conquering peaceful traders. The vote, when it came, was closer than many expected, but the decision was clear. Humanity would resist. As delegates rushed back to their homeworlds to begin implementation of the defense plan, Captain Anderson's ship was already halfway back to the alien fleet. His message to Admiral Vorth would be simple and direct. Humanity respectfully declined to surrender. What the Drakmari Admiral didn't know was that every human world was already transforming itself into a fortress. Every civilian was becoming a potential soldier, and every peaceful installation was revealing its hidden military purpose. The countdown to war had begun, and humanity intended to make it a fight the Drakmari Empire would never forget. 3 standard days had passed since Captain Anderson delivered humanity's refusal to surrender, and Admiral Vorth found himself staring at tactical displays that made no sense. According to his intelligence officers, human activity throughout their territory had increased dramatically, but the reports were contradictory and confusing. "Admiral," reported Intelligence Chief Krayla, her voice betraying uncertainty that was unusual for a veteran Drakmari officer. "Our long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from human industrial facilities, but we cannot determine their exact nature. The readings suggest either large-scale manufacturing or weapons testing." Vorth dismissed the concern with a wave of his scaled hand. "Desperate preparations by a doomed species. They are probably building whatever crude weapons they think might help them. It will make no difference when we begin the assault." The Admiral had chosen Titan Base as his first target, a remote human mining colony on the edge of their territory. Intelligence reports suggested it was lightly defended with perhaps 50 civilian vessels and a handful of patrol boats. A perfect demonstration of Drakmari power that would surely convince other human worlds to surrender before facing similar destruction. "Signal the advance fleet," Vorth commanded. 100 ships should be sufficient to eliminate this minor outpost. Once the humans see how easily we destroy their colonies, the remaining worlds will abandon any thoughts of resistance. The Drakmari attack force emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Titan system, their dark hulls cutting through space like predatory sharks. Vorth observed from his flagship's command center, expecting to see the usual signs of panic. Civilian vessels fleeing in terror, desperate communications begging for mercy. Perhaps a few token defensive platforms offering futile resistance. Instead, the system appeared almost empty. Long-range sensors detected the expected mining stations scattered throughout the asteroid belt. Dozens of cargo containers floating near the main colony, and what appeared to be normal civilian traffic moving between installations. "Sir," reported the fleet's tactical officer, "we're detecting approximately 200 human vessels in system, mostly industrial ships and transports. No significant military presence visible." Vorth nodded with satisfaction. Another easy conquest, exactly as predicted. These humans had learned nothing from their previous encounters with superior civilizations. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Target the mining stations first, then move to the colonial infrastructure. Leave the civilian transports for last. I want them to witness what resistance to the Drakmari Empire brings." The first wave of Drakmari destroyers moved toward their targets, weapons charging for what should have been a routine bombardment, but as they approached the nearest mining station, space around them suddenly erupted in deadly light. What had appeared to be simple ore processing facilities revealed their true nature as the armor. Plating fell away to expose massive particle cannons and missile launch systems. The cargo containers scattered throughout the system split open like deadly flowers, releasing swarms of attack drones that moved with coordination impossible for hastily assembled defenses. "What in the void?" Vorth began, but his words were cut off as his tactical display lit up with threat indicators. The asteroid belt itself seemed to come alive as concealed weapon batteries emerged from carefully carved hiding places, their guns tracking the approaching Drakmari ships with precision that spoke of months of preparation. Hidden among the rocks were railgun installations capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. "Admiral," the tactical officer shouted over the growing chaos, "we're detecting massive energy spikes from all directions. These aren't civilian installations, they're military fortifications. Captain Lisa Wong crouched in the cramped command center of her converted freighter, the Silver Star, watching her tactical display with grim satisfaction as the Drakmari ships moved deeper into the trap. Her vessel had been hauling grain between colonies just 2 weeks ago, but hidden modification bays throughout human space had transformed thousands of civilian ships into makeshift warships. All units, this is Wong, she transmitted on the encrypted tactical frequency. Execute pattern. Delta on my mark, remember, we don't need to win. We just need to make them pay for every meter. Her ship shuddered as nuclear-tipped torpedoes launched from concealed bays, joining a coordinated barrage from dozens of similarly modified vessels. The weapons were crude, compared to Drakmari technology, but they were numerous and strategically deployed. Commander Ryan Torres piloted his mining ship, the Rockbreaker, through the chaos of the engagement, using his intimate knowledge of the asteroid field to stay ahead of Drakmari targeting systems. His vessel's industrial cutting lasers had been modified to focus their beams into weapons capable of slicing through armor plating. Torres to all mining units, he broadcast. Use the asteroids for cover and hit their engines if we can't. Destroy them. We can strand them for the next wave. The modified mining ships darted between asteroids like deadly insects, their powerful engines designed for hauling massive ore loads, giving them surprising maneuverability in the confined space. They struck at Drakmari vessels with surgical precision, targeting propulsion systems and weapon mounts rather than attempting to destroy the heavily armored ships outright. Vorth watched in growing amazement as his easy target transformed into a carefully orchestrated death trap. The humans were losing ships, 3 of theirs for every Drakmari vessel destroyed. But they fought with a coordination and tactical sophistication that suggested extensive planning. How did they prepare defenses this extensive without our intelligence? Networks detecting them? Demanded Intelligence Chief Crail, her voice tight with professional embarrassment. Sir, interrupted the communications officer, we're receiving suicide attack runs from multiple human vessels. They're deliberately ramming our ships. Vorth's attention focused on the tactical display as he watched a damaged human cargo hauler accelerate directly toward one of his heavy cruisers. The human ship's engines were failing, its weapons destroyed, but instead of surrendering or attempting to flee, it maintained course for a direct collision. All units evasive maneuvers. Vorth commanded, but the warning came too late. The cargo hauler struck the Drakmari cruiser amidships, its momentum and remaining fuel creating a massive explosion that broke the larger ship's back and sent both vessels tumbling into the asteroid field as expanding debris clouds. Admiral, reported the fleet tactical coordinator. We're seeing similar sacrifice attacks throughout the engagement zone. The humans appear to be using damaged vessels as guided missiles. What disturbed Vorth most was not the tactic itself, but the casual way these humans employed it. This wasn't desperate last-moment heroism. It was calculated strategic doctrine, as if they had planned from the beginning to use their own ships as weapons when conventional attacks proved insufficient. Captain Lisa Wong's ship took a direct hit from a Drakmari plasma cannon, her engines failing and life support systems damaged beyond repair. Instead of calling for rescue or attempting to evacuate her crew, she plotted an intercept course with the nearest enemy destroyer. Wong to Fleet Command, she transmitted, calmly. Silver Star is combat ineffective but still mobile. Initiating ramming attack on target designation 77 Alpha. Good hunting. Her ship's remaining crew strapped themselves in as Wong pushed her failing engines to maximum output, accelerating toward the Drakmari vessel with the same precision she had once used to dock with cargo platforms. The enemy ship tried to evade, but the confined space of the asteroid field limited its maneuvering options. The collision tore both ships apart, but Wong's sacrifice eliminated a destroyer that would have killed dozens of other human vessels throughout the system. Similar scenes played out as human commanders made calculated decisions to trade their lives for tactical advantage. Unlike the species the Drakmari had conquered before, these humans seemed to understand instinctively that individual survival mattered less than collective victory. Fleet status report, Vorth demanded, his earlier confidence replaced by growing concern. Sir, "We have 57 ships destroyed, or combat ineffective," reported the tactical officer. "An additional 96 vessels have sustained significant damage. Human losses appear to be approximately 3 times our own, but their resistance is far more organized than anticipated." Vorth studied the battle damage assessments with growing unease. By any measure, this was still a Drekmari victory. They controlled the system and had eliminated the human defensive installations. But the cost had been exponentially higher than any previous conquest. "Admiral," interrupted the communications officer, "we're detecting additional human reinforcements entering the system. Approximately 100 vessels, mixed civilian and military configurations. The reinforcing human fleet moved with the same coordinated precision that had characterized the defensive battle, their ships deploying in formations that maximized their limited firepower while minimizing their exposure to Drekmari weapons." But what truly disturbed Vorth was the realization that these humans had prepared multiple lines of defense, with reserve forces positioned to continue the fight even after their main installations were destroyed. This suggested a level of military planning and resource allocation far beyond what intelligence had predicted. "Sir," reported the fleet engineer, "preliminary analysis of human weapons and tactics suggests they have been studying our military capabilities for some time. Their modifications and deployments appear specifically designed to counter Drekmari tactical doctrine." As the battle for Titan Base continued into its 8th hour, Vorth found himself confronting an uncomfortable truth. These humans were not the primitive, easily conquered species he had expected. They were strategic thinkers who had spent considerable time and resources preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. The Drekmari would win this battle, probably within the next few hours. But for the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vorth was beginning to question whether victory over humanity would be as swift or as cheap as the Empire expected. The humans had already cost him more ships in one engagement than he typically lost in an entire campaign. And if this remote mining colony could mount such fierce resistance, what would they encounter when they reached the core human worlds? For the first time since arriving in human space, Vorth's confident smirk began to fade. Victory at Titan Base had cost Admiral Vorth more ships than he expected, but the psychological impact on his fleet was even more concerning. His crews whispered among themselves about human tactics, about ships that fought until complete destruction, about defenders who turned their own vessels into weapons without hesitation. Intelligence reports from the battle painted a disturbing picture of human capabilities. These creatures had spent months, perhaps years, converting their civilian infrastructure into military assets while maintaining the appearance of peaceful commerce. Every cargo container could hide weapon systems. Every mining station could conceal gun batteries. Every transport ship could become a missile. "Admiral," reported his intelligence chief during the post-battle briefing, "analysis of captured human communications suggests their preparations extend far beyond what we observed at Titan Base. Every human system appears to contain similar hidden defenses." Vorth studied the tactical projections with growing irritation. The humans had turned their entire territory into a fortress, while his forces had assumed they were dealing with helpless civilians. But surely their core worlds could not maintain such extensive deceptions. "Signal the main fleet," he commanded. "We advance directly on their home system. 400 ships should be sufficient to crush whatever defenses they have prepared around Earth. Once we eliminate their government and military command, the remaining colonies will surrender." The journey to Sol System took 3 days, during which human resistance continued to harass Drekmari supply lines and communication networks. Small groups of human ships appeared without warning, struck at vulnerable targets, then vanished into the vast emptiness of space before reinforcements could arrive. These hit-and-run attacks accomplished little in terms of actual damage, but they forced Vorth to deploy significant resources protecting his logistics trains. Ships that should have been available for the main assault were instead scattered across dozens of systems, hunting elusive human raiders. As the Drekmari fleet approached Sol System, long-range sensors detected exactly what Vorth expected to see: A few hundred human vessels arranged in defensive formations around their home world, supported by orbital, weapon platforms and what appeared to be hastily constructed shield generators. "Sir," reported the fleet tactical officer, "human defensive strength appears consistent with our estimates, approximately 200 warships, 50 orbital stations, and scattered smaller vessels. We maintain a 2-to-1 numerical advantage with significantly superior firepower." Forth allowed himself a smile of satisfaction. Finally, a straightforward military engagement, where Drakmari technological superiority would decide the outcome. No more hidden installations or surprise attacks from converted cargo haulers. "Signal all ships," he commanded. "Battle Formation Alpha. We advance in 3 waves with heavy cruisers leading to absorb any initial bombardment. Once we break their orbital defenses, the destroyers move in to eliminate their fleet." The human ships began, retreating as the Drakmari fleet entered the outer edge of the solar system, their formations appearing to dissolve under the pressure of facing overwhelming enemy numbers. Several human vessels broke away from their defensive positions and fled toward the outer planets, their retreat looking like the beginning of a complete rout. "They're running," observed the fleet communications officer with obvious satisfaction. "Should we pursue the fleeing vessels?" "Let them go," Forth decided. "Focus on the main defensive force. Once we destroy their organized resistance, the scattered ships will surrender or be hunted down at our convenience." But as his fleet moved deeper into the system, pursuing what appeared to be a retreating enemy, space around them began to reveal secrets that had been hidden for months. The first surprise came from Jupiter's largest moon, where what sensors had identified as a research station suddenly powered up massive energy projectors that had been disguised as communication arrays. These weapons reached across millions of kilometers to strike at the rear elements of the Drakmari formation. "Admiral," shouted the tactical officer, "we're detecting weapon signatures from multiple locations throughout the system. The asteroid belt, Saturn's rings, even some of the gas giant moons, they all contain military installations." Before Vorth could respond, the space around his fleet erupted in coordinated fire from dozens of hidden positions. What had appeared to be space debris and derelict satellites revealed themselves as weapon platforms, their guns emerging from a carefully constructed camouflage. Captain Reed Anderson stood in the command center of the rebuilt Earth Defense Station, watching as years of preparation finally revealed themselves to the enemy. Every piece of space junk in the solar system had been cataloged and, where possible, converted into a hidden military asset. "Anderson to all units," he broadcast on the fleet command frequency. "Execute Sol Defense Protocol 7. All hidden assets are weapons-free. Repeat, all hidden assets are weapons-free." Throughout the solar system, concealed installations that had masqueraded as civilian infrastructure for months suddenly activated their true purpose. Mining platforms became missile batteries, research stations became particle cannon arrays, and communication satellites became targeting relays for long-range bombardment. Admiral Patricia Kim emerged from her hiding position behind Neptune with a battle fleet that intelligence had assured Vorth did not exist. 150 human warships that had been concealed in the gas giant's shadow, their heat signatures masked by the planet's own thermal output. Kim to Sol Defense. She transmitted, "Strike Force Neptune is moving to attack positions. Beginning flanking maneuver now." Her ships accelerated toward the Drakmari fleet's exposed flank, their engines pushing them to speeds that stressed their structural limits. These vessels had been built specifically for this moment, designed to deliver maximum firepower in a single devastating strike. Engineer Max Sullivan activated the most ambitious project in human history from his position at Sol Station. The massive solar collection array that had supposedly been built to provide clean energy to Earth's orbital facilities was actually a weaponized solar concentrator, capable of focusing the sun's energy into a beam of unimaginable destructive power. "Sol hammer charging," Sullivan reported calmly. "Target acquisition in progress. Firing solution locked on flagship cluster." The concentrated solar energy lanced across space like the finger of an angry god, striking the center of the Drakmari formation with power measured in gigatons. 3 heavy cruisers simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to plasma by temperatures that matched those found in stellar cores. Vorth's flagship shuddered under the impact of human weapons that should not have existed, systems failing as his crew struggled to understand how they had been caught so completely off guard. "Damage report," he demanded, his voice barely audible over the sound of emergency klaxons. "Sir, we've lost 30% of the fleet in the first wave," reported the tactical officer, his voice tight with shock. "The humans have weapon platforms positioned throughout the entire system. We're surrounded." The retreating human ships suddenly reversed course, revealing that their apparent flight had been a carefully orchestrated maneuver to draw the Drakmari fleet into the center of a massive kill zone. Now they attacked with weapons far more advanced than anything Vorth had seen during previous encounters. Captain Ben Murphy led a squadron of modified industrial vessels armed with mining lasers that had been enhanced to slice through military-grade armor. His ships moved through the battle like deadly surgeons, targeting engine nacelles and weapon mounts with precision that crippled enemy vessels without destroying them outright. "Murphy to all mining units," he broadcast. "Target their propulsion systems. Dead ships can't maneuver, and disabled ships tie up their rescue resources." Commander Amy Foster coordinated massive swarms of attack drones that had been hidden throughout the asteroid belt, their simple programming allowing them to overwhelm sophisticated Drakmari point defense systems through sheer numbers. Thousands of small, cheap targets that forced enemy ships to expend expensive interceptor missiles. The Drakmari found themselves fighting a 3-dimensional battle across the entire solar system, with threats emerging from every direction and at every range. Human tactics proved devastatingly effective, using the system's natural features and years of preparation to create overlapping fields of fire. "Admiral," reported the fleet engineer with obvious panic, "we're detecting human reinforcements arriving from outside the system. Multiple fleets, possibly thousands of additional vessels." Vorth stared at his tactical displays in growing horror as he realized the full scope of human deception. This was not a desperate last stand by a doomed species. It was a carefully planned ambush that had been months in the making. The humans had deliberately allowed him to advance deep into their territory, feeding him intelligence that painted them as weak and disorganized, while secretly preparing the most elaborate trap in military history. Every system he had conquered, every easy victory he had achieved, had been part of a larger strategy to bring his entire fleet within range of their hidden weapons. "Sir," interrupted the communications officer, "we're receiving surrender demands from the human fleet. They're offering to allow evacuation of survivors if we power down our weapons immediately." For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vorth found himself facing the unthinkable prospect of surrender. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Drakmari Empire, was being systematically destroyed by creatures he had dismissed as primitive savages. As another wave of human attacks tore through his formation, Vorth realized that his greatest mistake had been believing his own propaganda about Drakmari superiority. These humans were not the helpless victims he had expected. They were predators who had turned their entire civilization into a weapon. The trap had been sprung and there would be no escape. The Battle of Sol had raged for 18 hours, and what remained of Admiral Vorth's once mighty fleet was trapped in a shrinking pocket of space as human forces closed in from all directions. Escape routes that had existed at the beginning of the engagement had been systematically eliminated. By coordinated human strikes, Vorth's flagship, the Imperial Fang, limped through space on failing engines while emergency repair crews struggled to maintain basic life support. Around him, the scattered remnants of his fleet fought desperate holding actions against human forces that seemed to multiply with every passing hour. "Fleet status," he demanded wearily, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, voice hollow with exhaustion, "we have 43 vessels remaining combat effective. Another 12 are operational but severely damaged. We've lost over 90% of our initial strength." The numbers were almost incomprehensible to Vorth, who had never imagined losing more than a dozen ships in any single engagement. The Drakmari Empire had built its reputation on swift, decisive victories that minimized casualties through overwhelming technological advantage. But these humans fought differently than any species the Empire had encountered. They used every advantage available, turning the solar system's natural features into weapons and coordinating attacks across distances that should have made real-time command impossible. Captain Ben Murphy's industrial squadron had proved particularly effective. Their modified mining equipment slicing through Drakmari armor with surgical precision. His ships darted between the gas giant moons, using gravitational assists to achieve impossible intercept vectors, while their enhanced cutting beams disabled enemy vessels with minimal energy expenditure. Murphy to all industrial units came the transmission over human tactical frequencies that Drakmari codebreakers had finally cracked. Focus on their command ships, cut their communication arrays first, then target bridge sections. Blind leadership causes more chaos than destroyed weapons. Commander Amy Foster's drone swarms had evolved throughout the battle, their simple artificial intelligence learning from each engagement and adapting their attack patterns to counter Drakmari defensive measures. What had started as crude kamikaze attacks had become sophisticated coordinated strikes that exploited weaknesses in enemy formations. The most disturbing aspect of human tactics, from Vorth's perspective, was their willingness to accept casualties in pursuit of strategic objectives. Unlike species that surrendered when losses reached 20 or 30%, humans continued fighting at full effectiveness even after losing hundreds of vessels. "Admiral," interrupted his communications officer, "we're receiving another surrender demand from the Human Fleet Command." "Captain, Anderson is offering safe passage for all survivors if we power down weapons and prepare for inspection." Vorth stared at the communication panel, reading words he had never expected to see directed at a Drakmari fleet. The humans were offering him terms as if he were some minor warlord rather than a representative of a galactic empire. "Sir," added the officer hesitantly, "they're also transmitting technical specifications for emergency life support modifications. Apparently, they want to ensure our damaged ships can maintain crew survival during the evacuation process." Even in victory, these humans demonstrated a concern for enemy casualties that Vorth found incomprehensible. The Drakmari Empire showed mercy only when it served strategic purposes, but these creatures seemed genuinely interested in minimizing unnecessary death. Captain Reed Anderson's voice came through the communication system with the same calm professionalism he had displayed during their first encounter weeks ago. "Admiral Vorth, this is Captain Anderson. I want to emphasize that our offer of safe passage is genuine. We have no interest in needless slaughter, but we also cannot allow your remaining ships to threaten human colonies. Power down your weapons and we can discuss evacuation procedures." Vorth closed his eyes, feeling the weight of centuries of Drakmari military tradition pressing down on him. No admiral in the Empire's history had ever surrendered a fleet, and the political consequences of such an action would destroy not only his career but possibly his entire clan lineage. "Admiral," reported the engineering officer, "long-range sensors are detecting additional human fleets entering the system. At least 2,000 vessels, including ships we've never seen before. Sir, they appear to have been building warships in secret for years." The final revelation hit Vorth like a physical blow. These humans had not simply prepared defenses and converted civilian infrastructure. They had been conducting a massive military buildup, while maintaining the appearance of a peaceful species focused on exploration. And trade engineer Max Sullivan's voice joined the communication frequency from Sol Station. His tone matter-of-fact, as he delivered information that would reshape Drakmari understanding of human capabilities. "Admiral Vorth, our intelligence indicates that your empire has conquered 47 worlds over the past 3 centuries. We want you to understand that humanity has studied every one of those campaigns, analyzed your tactics, and spent 20 years preparing specifically for this confrontation." Sullivan paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "Every defensive measure you've encountered, every weapon system that surprised you, every tactical maneuver that confused your forces, all of it was designed based on detailed analysis of Drakmari military doctrine. You weren't fighting a primitive species making desperate improvised defenses. You were fighting an enemy that knows your capabilities better than you know theirs. The communication channel filled with silence as Vorth absorbed the implications of Sullivan's revelation. The humans had not simply resisted Drakmari conquest. They had anticipated it, studied it, and prepared a response specifically tailored to counter everything the Empire considered a strategic advantage. Admiral, his intelligence chief reported quietly. Preliminary analysis suggests the humans have been monitoring our empire for decades. They may know more about our internal political structure, our military capabilities, and our expansion patterns than our own strategic planning committees. Vorth felt his worldview crumbling as he realized that humanity's apparent weakness had been an elaborate deception designed to lure the Empire into a trap. These creatures had deliberately appeared primitive and defenseless, while secretly building the most sophisticated military infrastructure he had ever encountered. "Sir," interrupted the tactical officer, "human forces are moving into final attack positions. If we're going to surrender, we need to signal our intentions immediately." Admiral Patricia Kim's fleet had completed its flanking maneuver, positioning her ships to deliver a final devastating strike against the remaining Drakmari vessels. Her voice joined the communication frequency with a tone that mixed professional respect with absolute determination. "Admiral Vorth, you have fought well with the resources available to you. But this engagement is over. Signal your surrender now, and your crews will be treated according to standard humanitarian protocols. Continue fighting, and we will be forced to eliminate your remaining ships." Vorth looked around his damaged bridge at officers who had served with distinction throughout the Empire's expansion campaigns. These were experienced professionals who had never known defeat, and their faces reflected the same shock and disbelief that he felt. "Admiral," his communications officer said softly, "what are your orders?" For long moments, Vorth said nothing, staring at tactical displays that showed the hopelessness of his situation. 50 ships against thousands, surrounded in enemy territory with no possibility of reinforcement or escape. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weariness of a warrior who had learned too late that his enemies were far more dangerous than he had imagined. "Signal all ships," Vorth commanded quietly. "Power down weapons and prepare for surrender. Transmit our crew manifest to the human fleet and request evacuation assistance for our most severely damaged vessels." The surrender of the Drakmari fleet sent shockwaves throughout human space, but the celebrations were tempered by the knowledge that this had been only the first engagement in what would likely be a much longer conflict. Captain Anderson stood on the observation deck of Earth Defense Station, watching as human rescue ships moved to assist damaged Drakmari vessels. Even in victory, humanity maintained the ethical standards that had guided their species throughout its expansion into space. Anderson to all fleet commanders, he transmitted, "Begin Phase 4 operations immediately. Our intelligence indicates that Admiral Vorth's fleet represents only a fraction of total Drakmari military strength. We need to be prepared for retaliation." As the last Drakmari survivors were evacuated to human medical facilities, Admiral Vorth composed his final report to the Empire. The message would travel across dozens of star systems, carrying news that would fundamentally change how the Drakmari viewed their place in the galaxy. His report was brief and devastating: avoid human space at all costs. These creatures were not primitive savages to be conquered, but sophisticated predators who had turned warfare into both art and science. They possessed technology, tactics, and strategic thinking that rivaled anything the Empire had developed over centuries of expansion. But perhaps most importantly, they had something the Drakmari Empire had lost through its easy victories: the hunger and determination of a species still fighting for its place among the stars. As human shipyards throughout Sol system began construction of even more advanced warships, it became clear that humanity's defensive victory was already transforming into preparation for offensive operations. These humans had not simply survived first contact with a galactic empire. They had defeated it so decisively that they were now preparing to challenge the established order throughout their region of space. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same.